The coronavirus epidemic and our response to it reveals many of the weaknesses in our society. To prevent the worst possible outcomes of the disease, we have to shelter in our homes. That means many people can't work, and those people who can't work are more vulnerable than they were before. How do they pay rent? Even more basically, how do they eat? Have you seen the pictures of the long lines of cars, sometimes 2 miles in length, outside food banks across the country? I have, and they break my heart. I have a friend who works at the emergency food bank of Contra Costa and Solano counties, and he told me that the demand for their services has gone up 40% in the last 6 weeks. They face millions of dollars in new costs, and he doesn't know how they're going to raise the money, but they know they have to feed the people, that our fellow citizens can't go hungry. This week's Torah portion, A More, focuses in part on the cycle of the Jewish holidays. Pesach, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. And in the middle of the description of the holiday cycle of the Jewish calendar year, there's this incongruent verse that doesn't seem to fit. It goes, "And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God." What is this verse doing here? Why do we talk about peah, leaving the corners of the field unharvested, and leket, leaving the grain that falls to the ground so it can be gleaned by the landless poor? Why is this here in the midst of this description of the ritual calendar? Maimonides in his Mishnah Torah, in the section Holidays or Festivals, writes this: "When an individual eats and drinks at a festive meal, he is obliged to give food to the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. But if one locks the door of his courtyard and eats and drinks with his wife and children, and does not give food and drink to needy people, this is not a mitzvah celebration, but rather a celebration of the stomach, and this kind of celebration is reprehensible." Maimonides reminds us that our ritual obligations are there to remind us of our social obligations, of our obligation to help those who are most in need. And here we are, locked in our houses, eating and drinking with our family, while all around us there are people who are anxious, afraid, have lost jobs, and may go hungry. Public schools have mostly closed, but they remain open for one purpose, because their hot meal programs are the only ways that children can be ensured to get some food every day. That's the level of food insecurity in our country. Those of us who are fortunate enough to have work and income or savings cannot forget those who are most in need. I began by saying that this crisis reveals the weaknesses in our society, but it also has the potential to reveal our strengths. We are all feeling extremely vulnerable now. Because this is a collective response to the crisis, we are also being reminded that we are all in this together. As a society, we rise or we fall collectively, not as individuals. I hope that when we emerge from this crisis, as I'm sure we will, that we will take those lessons with us and that we will act on them. And we can even act now. If you have the means, you can give to your local food bank to make sure that those among us who do not have enough food can eat. God forbid that some people should starve while we fight this disease. And when this is over, perhaps the empathy, the sense of interconnectedness And the vulnerability that we have learned will remind us to go forth and to build a society that is more empathetic, more compassionate, and more just than the one we are leaving behind.